Welcome to the Transforming Leadership Podcast with author and speaker Dr. Steve Steff. I'm Jim Brangenberg, your host for the day. For more information about Dr. Steff and how the Transforming Leadership team builds effectiveness in leaders, please look online at tleadership.com. That's tleadership.com. Now let's join Dr. Steff in the studio. Hi, I'm Jim Brangenberg, and I'm joined by Dr. Steve Steff, the founder of Transforming Leadership. Before we begin, Steve, I think it'd be great to remind everybody we're going through what we refer to as the Transforming Leadership Proverbs, a series of proverbs that you and your team have put together, sayings, truisms, as you have walked alongside leaders and coached them. These are things that have come up, that bubbled up to the top many, many times. Today's proverb is going to be an interesting one, Steve. Here's the proverb of the day. Understanding by the listener is always the responsibility of the speaker. Now, I got to tell you, I had speech class in college. I've done a lot of speeches. Nobody's ever told me that. What do you mean?
We work with, as you know, primarily senior leaders in the workplace. And I can't tell you, Jim, how many times I've worked with senior leaders that are frustrated in dealing with their teams, whether they be executive teams or whether they be functional teams, whatever they might be, frustrated with their direct reports because they keep telling them something and the direct report's not following through, or they have to tell them the same thing over and over and over again. And the fact is, they're telling them, they are delivering data, they're delivering information, but generally they are not taking the time to ensure that the message is received. There's a difference in telling someone something and making sure the message is received. So the understanding is always the responsibility of the speaker. Just because I tell you doesn't mean that you've understood, or doesn't mean, I'll go a step further. You may have understood what I said, but you didn't necessarily understand what I meant. You know, that could be two different things as well.
But I've told them over and over and over again, take out the garbage, son. I'm just asking to take that garbage out. Would you just take the garbage out? But but I get frustrated. I mean, that was a bad example, but in a leadership position, we ask people to do the same things over and over again, and they just won't get it done. But I think it goes back to something that I've learned a lot in marriage mentoring, Steve. This one thing that when you say something to your spouse, they don't necessarily hear what you actually said because they've interpreted through their personal filter.
That's right. Yeah,
so
that's exactly right.
One of the greatest.
What you said and what I heard may be two different things.
So how do you fix that?
Yeah. Here's a great phrase, if you will, catchphrase, and I think this was coined maybe by Chip and Dan Heath. Maybe not, but they certainly use it in their books, and it's called the curse of knowledge. So the curse of knowledge is when I know something so well, or know so much about some particular subject, that it's in fact difficult for me to communicate about that subject because I don't realize that you don't understand what I'm talking about. So best example is a surgeon. If you've ever had opportunity, and I know in the last year or so with your organ donation, you had a lot of opportunity to have conversation with the surgeon. It's real easy for the surgeon to just start explaining something in great detail, and you're sitting there nodding your head, and yeah, I'm with you. You don't have a clue what they're talking about. Because the context, his understanding is that, well, everybody knows this. Yeah. So when he uses his surgeon words, if you will, or our engineer words, or our department words, I'm believing that you're understanding what I'm looking for, what I'm talking about. And you may be nodding your head and smiling, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you thoroughly understood, or that you understood the outcome that I was looking for.
What is one great question that you as a leader can ask of the person that you are talking to make sure that they have heard what you actually meant to say?
Depending on who you're talking with, and you might couch the question, but essentially what you're going to ask is, repeat, tell me back your understanding of what I'm looking for. Because I started to say it's not unusual, more often than not, we got feedback that their understanding, there's a pretty good gap between their understanding and exactly what my expectation is. And until I ask that question, I don't really know what they're hearing, how they're filtering that.
How often do you think that kind of disconnect happens in the average corporate environment in America?
All day, every day. It's just all day, every day.
It's no wonder
Um,
people aren't frustrated that are frustrated all the time at work.
oh yeah, I've got a client that I'm working with right now, and it's as though his boss, who is the CEO, has told me it's as though a light has come on with this guy because it just has never occurred to him. So I asked him in a coaching session a few months back. I said, "You have children?" He said, "Yes." "You have a daughter that's 4 years old?" "Yes." I said, "Do you ever talk with that daughter and tell her something that you find out later that she just didn't understand?" "Yes." "Did you know at the time that she didn't understand it?" "No, I didn't." And then I had to be careful how I couch this because I was talking about the guy's daughter. But what I'm thinking was, what did she not understand it just because uh, she's not smart enough to understand it? No, well, clearly that's not the case because clearly it's a brilliant 4-year-old. Or did she not understand it because perhaps she didn't have the experience to understand what he was talking about? Did she not understand it because she didn't understand the context of what he was talking about? Both of those things are more likely. So if it is important to you, Jim, for your 4-year-old to understand this, then you are going to simplify the explanation to make sure that you're putting it in terms and in context that they can understand. And I would say that that's incumbent on us in the workplace. We're certainly not talking to 4-year-olds, and I've got all sorts of sarcastic jokes that I could make there, but it's incumbent on me to make sure that there is a full understanding. Just because I've got it doesn't mean that you're hearing it. So again, the old expression, what I'm saying and what you're hearing are two different things. They are, because they are always filtered through my context, my emotions, my understanding, and my priorities. So we've got to ask the questions. First, we've got to go in prepared to give a thorough explanation. And then we have to take the time to ask the questions to assure understanding.
I'm not sure if you just said, but it also has to filter through. So the context, their
Right.
personal filter, their life experiences, but also their emotions at the time.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Because
We
somebody might have been they get called in, they get really frustrated, or they came in, they were already upset because something's going on at home. We often don't, in the work context, take into consideration what's going on at home.
absolutely.
But all of that impacts our ability to hear and understand.
And understand. Yeah. Yeah. It not only we just posted, my organization just posted an article to LinkedIn in the last day or so, talking about the emotional impact of the current political, social, health environment, financial environment that we're living in. So it impacts not only our uh, ability to understand, Jim, but our willingness to understand. I've got my mind on things that are maybe more important, or at least more important to me right now. So I not only am not hearing what you're saying, I don't really care to some extent. Now that's, that may sound harsh, but it's got to move up on my priority list somehow. And it's your responsibility to help me move it up. The fact that you dictate it, um, I understand that from an authority standpoint, but if we're talking about getting it done, if we're talking about effectiveness, we can put authority out the window and just talk about effectiveness. I have to communicate in the way that's most effective. Let's imagine this. This is an extreme, but I think it's a valid example. I've got another client that is not U.S. born. He's from the Middle East, and I've got to assume that when he's at home in the Middle East, that he's exceptionally fluent. I know for a fact that he's exceptionally well educated. He has decades of experience in his industry. And I have to believe that when he is back there, that his communication is just as smooth and fluid as it could possibly be. I confess that in our coaching sessions, I struggle because I have to ask him to repeat things. I have to ask him to explain things that are really probably pretty simple concepts, but I just didn't understand because of the language barrier.
Sure.
It what we are trying to get across with that phrase is that there are language barriers for those of us that are English as our first language as well. There are language barriers because I don't understand um, your technical context. There are language barriers because your processes are different from my process. So when you say something, I'm trying to apply it in the context of our processes. So questions, the counter to this, the solution to this is to learn to ask effective questions to ensure that I have communicated effectively.
Yeah, right before the show today, we were talking about growing up and some experiences, and we talked about
Yeah.
a beautiful winter morning. Now, your perspective of a beautiful winter morning, having grown up in Florida versus my example or my idyllic beautiful winter morning, having grown up in the frozen tundra of Minnesota, they're different, yet the words are exactly the same.
Yeah, absolutely. We can identify winter down there because of so many out-of-state license plates. So that's how we know it's winter.
And the humidity, it drops.
Humidity drops in the tank down to the mid 80s. So that's a good winter day for us. For you, your context is altogether different.
Right.
So it is. I start to say it's important. It's not. It is imperative that we remember that each of us, all of us, every one of us has a different context. So we must slow down a little bit. I'm not talking about drag it out. Slow down a little bit just to ensure that we have communicated effectively and that the listener not only understands exactly what I have said to them, but my expectations and my intent and what I've said. I have to, we need to throw in there as well that uh, not only is this based on the fact that the listener might have a different context, but I may not be the most effective communicator in what I'm saying as well. So, as evidenced by the last couple sentences, uh, you know, I've got to become more skilled. I've got to build that skill of effective communication, not only in answering questions, but in making sure that I provide include exactly what my expectations are when I'm communicating.
I like that. So the proverb today we're talking about is understanding by the listener is always the responsibility of the speaker. And I want to, I'm a simple guy. I don't have doctor in front of my name. To me, it seems like this can be narrowed down to just a couple of very simple sentences. After you say something to somebody, ask them, what is it that you heard me say and ask you to do? And then just let them talk. I mean, this is a simple process because we're trying to learn how to communicate, and you have to learn your people because you may have 5 direct reports, and you may have to communicate differently to each one of those direct reports. Just like growing up, I got 3 kids.
Exactly.
I got to talk to all 3 of my kids totally differently. Same thing as
to get the same outcome.
Right.
That's
because
right.
Because they all process differently.
Yeah.
So, and yes, from all 3 of them means totally different things. Yes, from my youngest daughter means it'll be done in 30 seconds. Yes, from my son will mean, yeah, probably not going to do that. And yes, from my oldest daughter will mean, I'm going to do it. It'll probably be after I go to Starbucks and get a coffee.
Yeah.
So, so in the corporate environment, Steve, it's about appreciating our people and learning who they are in order to help them be successful. Am I catching this? Because it seems like this is a simple solution.
Yeah, absolutely. You're catching it. One of the words today that gets a lot of attention is diversity. And we need to understand that there is diversity in every group, regardless of race, creed, color, sexual orientation, whatever. There's diversity in every group of listeners. So yes, it's as simple as asking those questions. Now I have to be careful that I ask those questions in a non-offensive way, because I want to be effective even in asking the question. But if I ask the question and I get the feedback that assures me that they have heard not only my words, but my intent, see, there's the magic word, the intent, that they've heard not only my words, but my intent, then I can walk away from there comfortable that I have communicated effectively.
And if your direct reports are used to you asking that question, what did you hear me say? They're not going to take offense at that because
that's
they're
right.
expecting it.
Yeah,
Because they know that you're trying to fine tune your communication method. Dr. Steve Steff, this is a fantastic conversation. Understanding by the listeners always the responsibility of the speaker. A fantastic one, Steve. Thank you.
Good. Thanks, Jim.
And to our listeners, please check us out online, tleadership.com, tleadership.com. Lots of ways for you to connect with us on our website, our phone number, a contact us page. We'd love to hear from you on how we can help you become a transforming leader. Until next time. And that ends our discussion for today. Thanks for listening to the Transforming Leadership Podcast with author and speaker, Dr. Steve Steff. For more information on how Dr. Steff and the Transforming Leadership team can help you become a more effective leader, please look online at tleadership.com. That's tleadership.com. Until next time, remember, building effectiveness in leaders starts with the transformation of your heart towards your people.